I moved to a random city without a plan here. What I learned. Don't know what exactly made me do it. Maybe it was burnout. Maybe I just wanted a fresh start. Or maybe I had just watched too many YouTube videos romanticizing the idea of starting over in a new city. Whatever it was, one random afternoon I made a decision. I was going to pack my things, pick a city at random, and move there. No job lined up. No apartment secured. No connections. Just me, my savings, and a vague idea that it would all somehow work out. Spoiler, it didn't. At least not at first. Step 1. Spinning the wheel of destiny. I wanted this to feel truly random. So instead of picking a city I had always wanted to visit, I used a random city generator online. I hit the button, and it landed on Kansas City, Missouri. At first, I laughed. It was New York or LA or even Austin, places where I knew people. It was Kansas City, a place I had never thought about moving to in my life. But that was the whole point, right? To throw myself into something unpredictable. Within a week, I had sold most of my furniture, packed my car with essentials, and was on the road. The drive there felt like the beginning of a grand adventure. I was excited, nervous, hopeful. Then reality hit. Step 2, finding a place to live or not. I had severely underestimated how difficult it would be to find housing in a city I knew nothing about. My original plan was simple. Book an Airbnb for a few days. Find an apartment within a week. Move in and start figuring out life. Turns out, apartment hunting in an unfamiliar city with no local references and no job is not easy. Every landlord either wanted proof of employment, a hefty security deposit, or a local cosigner, none of which I had. I called at least 20 places, and every single one turned me down. At first, I thought, okay, I'll just extend my Airbnb stay. But guess what? The price nearly doubled for the next few days. I didn't have an unlimited budget, so I had to make a tough call, either find somewhere cheaper fast or start sleeping in my car. I ended up bouncing between budget motels and short-term rentals for weeks. It was draining. Every day, I woke up feeling like I had made a huge mistake. My savings were disappearing, and I still had no stable place to live. And then, things got worse. Step 3, the joy of utilities and bureaucracy. Eventually, I found a studio apartment that I could afford, but it was in an old building, and the landlord was, let's just say, not great. The place had no internet set up, and when I called to get it installed, the provider told me they needed to run a new line, which would take 3 weeks. Fine, whatever. I could deal with no internet for a while. But then the electricity bill came in, except it wasn't mine. The previous tenant had left an unpaid balance, and the power company told me they wouldn't start service in my name until the past due amount was paid off. It took days of arguing with them to get it sorted out, and even then, my electricity got shut off twice in my first month due to billing issues. Welcome to adulthood, I guess. Step 4, the loneliness hits hard. Once I finally had a place to stay, no matter how sketchy it was, I expected things to start getting better. I was wrong. The next challenge hit me like a brick wall. I knew absolutely no one in the city. Back home, I took little things for granted. Grabbing a drink with friends after work, randomly running into people I knew at coffee shops, even just having someone to call when I needed help moving a piece of furniture. None of that existed here. Kansas City wasn't exactly a walkable city, at least not in the area I could afford to live in. My apartment was in an older neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and houses that looked like they seen better days. The closest grocery store was over a mile away, and since I didn't know the area well, I avoided walking at night. I tried going out to bars and coffee shops, hopping to meet people naturally, but have you ever sat alone in a cafe for 2 hours, pretending to be busy on your laptop while eavesdropping on conversations, desperately hoping someone would talk to you? Yeah, not my proudest moment. I joined a few meetup groups, but most of them were either awkwardly small, think 5 people sitting in silence at a board game night, or huge and overwhelming, a crowded networking event where everyone already seemed to know each other. I felt like an outsider in every possible way. And then there were the little things, the moments that reminded me just how alone I was. Like the time my car battery died in the middle of a parking lot at night, and I realized I had no one to call for help. I ended up waiting 45 minutes for a tow truck, sitting in my car, watching happy couples and groups of friends walk past, feeling like the loneliest person on the planet. Or when I got sick and had to drag myself to the store for medicine because there was no one to bring me soup or check in on me. I found myself longing for even the most mundane human interactions, something as simple as a coworker making small talk about the weather. That was the hardest part. Not the money problems, not the logistical nightmares, just the sheer, crushing isolation. Step 5, the breakdown and the breakthrough. About 3 weeks in, I hit my lowest point. I remember sitting on my lumpy second-hand couch in my barely furnished apartment, eating instant ramen straight from the pot because I still hadn't bought bowls, and thinking, why did I do this to myself? The romanticized idea of starting over had crumbled. I wasn't thriving. I wasn't having cool new experiences, I was barely surviving. And for the first time, I seriously considered quitting, packing up my car, driving back home, and admitting defeat. But something stopped me. It wasn't pride, and it definitely wasn't because I suddenly believed things would get better. It was something much simpler. I had already sunk too much time and money into this to give up now. If I left, what was I going back to? The same job I had burned out from, the same routine I had been desperate to escape. No, if I was going to fail, I at least wanted to fail trying. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for things to get better on their own. I had to make them better. Step 6. Small wins, big impact. Once I made the decision to actually try, things didn't magically get better overnight, but small changes started to add up. First, the money situation. One night, while scrolling through old emails, because I still didn't have internet at home and was that bored, I came across something I had completely forgotten about, an old blog I had started years ago. It was a niche site about budget travel, and while I had abandoned it long ago, it still had some evergreen content that people were apparently still reading. Out of curiosity, I checked my ad account. There was $14.37 sitting there. $14 wouldn't even cover a meal, but it made me realize something. This website was still getting traffic. I did some quick research and found out that with a little effort, updating old posts, adding better affiliate links, writing a few new articles, I could probably turn it into a small but steady income stream. So over the next few weeks, I dedicated my evenings to reviving the blog. It wasn't a full-time job, and I wasn't making huge money, but after a month, I was averaging about $100 a month. Not life-changing, but it covered groceries. And more importantly, it gave me a sense of control. Step 7. People make the difference. Second big change happened by accident. I was in a laundromat, sitting on one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, waiting for my clothes to dry, when I overheard two guys talking about a side hustle they were working on, flipping furniture. They would find cheap or free furniture, fix it up, and resell it. One of them mentioned needing someone to help with basic website stuff, and before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "I know how to do that." They looked at me, slightly surprised, but within minutes we were talking. By the time my laundry was done, I had exchanged numbers with one of them, Eric, who invited me to grab a beer later that week. That one conversation led to more. I met Eric's friends, who introduced me to their friends. Within a few weeks, I had people to text, places to go on weekends, and most importantly, a feeling that I wasn't just surviving in this city. I was living in it. Step 8. Building a new routine. With a small but steady income from the blog and a growing social circle, life started to feel less like a constant struggle and more like something I could actually enjoy. I finally set up proper internet in my apartment, which meant no more sitting in coffee shops pretending to work just for the Wi-Fi. I also upgraded my living situation. Nothing fancy, but I at least had a real bed instead of just a mattress on the floor. That alone made me feel more like an actual adult instead of some lost college student. Work-wise, I stuck to my goal of growing my passive income. I spent a few hours each weekend updating my site and testing different ways to make money from it. Slowly but surely, my monthly earnings climbed to $200, then $250, not enough to live on, but enough to make a difference. And then, there was the biggest change. I actually started liking Kansas City. Step 9. Finding my spots. The thing about moving to a new city is that, at first, everything feels foreign. Every street looks the same, every restaurant is a gamble, and every place feels like it belongs to someone else. But over time, I started finding my places. There was a small diner a few blocks from my apartment, one of those spots that still had a jukebox at every booth and served coffee that tasted like it had been sitting in the pot for hours. The food was cheap, the waitresses called everyone hun, and it became my go-to breakfast spot. I also found a cozy little bookstore that hosted open mic nights. I wasn't a poet or a musician, but I started going just to listen. Eventually, I got to know the regulars, and one night, a guy named Mark invited me to grab a drink after the event. That one invitation led to another, and soon, I had a group of friends, the kind of people who actually texted me first instead of me always being the one to reach out. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just living in Kansas City anymore. I was part of Kansas City. Step 10. The realization. One night, about 2 months after I had first arrived in Kansas City, I was walking home from a bar with a couple of friends. It was late, the streets were quiet, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement from a recent rain. And for the first time since I had moved, I felt something unexpected. I felt at home. It hit me all at once, how much had changed since I got here. I wasn't that lost, desperate guy living off instant ramen anymore. I had a routine, a way to make money, friends to call on weekends. I had my spots, the diner, the bookstore, the dive bar where the bartender now recognized me. Most importantly, I had proved to myself that I could do it. Sure, I wasn't rolling in cash, and I still had moments where I missed home, but I had built a life here from nothing. And that meant I could do it anywhere. Final thoughts, what I learned. Looking back, moving to a random city with no plan was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it also taught me a few things. One, you adapt faster than you think. The first few weeks were rough, but humans are wired to survive. You figure things out. Two, money isn't everything, but stability matters. Passive income, even a small amount, made a huge difference. Having even a little financial security gave me the breathing room to focus on other things. Three, loneliness is the hardest part. More than money, housing, or logistics, the toughest challenge was feeling alone. Once I found my people, everything else got easier. Four, you don't really know a city until you live there. Kansas City wasn't on my radar before this, but now, it's my city. Would I do it again? Maybe. But if I did, I'd go in with a little more of a plan.